can we simply stay with any kind of blaming is coming up from the ego? How is it then possible to call out any unconscious actions without going down the same path of being unconscious? It's a really good question upon us. It is really difficult because when you're like totally immersed in self, the big self, like when there's absolutely no identification with body mind, I still have a certain amount of identification. I feel like there needs to be a certain amount of identification in order to function. But if I shut my eyes, or sometimes if I'm meditating or laying in the bath, then that total identification can disappear. And when you have that and you're interacting with people, so sometimes that's happened to me in the past, you can't see right or wrong at all. You're so immersed in love and in this moment, your brain, you're not identified enough with the body, and your brain isn't really interpreting what's happening in the moment. It's hard to explain if you've not had these energetic shifts and you don't know it. So if this isn't making sense to you, it doesn't really matter. You're so immersed in what you're doing, you really can't tell right from wrong. So you could do anything. Like in that place, you could murder someone, or it's unlikely you'd murder someone because that would take volition. So that would actually take you actually picking up a knife and stabbing someone. And I don't think that would arise. Like that takes identification with the body in order, like a desire to appear for that to arise, which could happen, but I doubt that. But you could watch a murder and have absolutely no issue with it. And that sounds really hardcore. Like you can have no issue with it. You could watch a rape, you could watch really like horrible things, and you have no identification with the body, and there's no sense of right or wrong. You can't sense that. You can't perceive good or bad. And this is like, so when I hear some teachers talking, especially like I remember watching this documentary about a cult and about a guy who was the leader of the cult and who was sleeping with he wasn't actually having sex, but he was sleeping naked in bed with like young teenage girls, like 12, 13-year-old, and they weren't actually having sex, but they were laying naked together. And then he was like sleeping with all the women, and he says that he just does it from God's will. It's like God's will acting through him. And I think that he's personally got the teaching muddled up, but I also understand to an extent and can sense to an extent that when there's like absolutely no identification left with the body, you can't perceive right and wrong. You can't also perceive how to do anything really complex. You're just watching. There's nothing but watching, and like the body like really disappears and the sensations in the body really disappear. There's just this immense watching. So even like the desire to make love might even not come up at that stage. But if someone were to come over and sexually pleasure you, then maybe then there would be the desire to make love, or maybe there'd be a bit more of an identification with the body. So I do understand the dangers of this subject, because when there's total disidentification from the body and there's just pure awareness or pure consciousness, there isn't any sense of good or bad or right or wrong or this or that or you or I. There's just looking. But in order for this body to function, it needs some sort of center. So it needs some form of identification with the body and the body's desire. Like it needs to feel desire in order to have motivation to come up. So the first couple of years, there was very little desire for my body to move and to function. And it just sat still for a lot of the time. And that was really beautiful. But in a way, like I wasn't being able to look after myself. And I was also asking for trouble because I couldn't perceive goodness and badness in other people very much. Like it was like a struggle to see goodness or badness, or how to interact with the world. And you do need to do that if you're interacting with the world. The body needs to be able to determine that. It's not actually you, but you need to be identified enough with the body to be able to feel like these feelings of good or bad. And you need to come to a place where you're kind of, there's like this ghost of identity, but it still has desires and volitions. And it still has likes and dislikes, and they're not enlightened. They're going to be based on the way they were before. But if you have none at all, then, I mean, you're going to get eaten. You're going to get eaten by this life, because it's impossible to determine anything. Like screw good and bad, just like negotiating a contract or going in and getting a bank account is too complex. So what I began to realize over the years was that there has to be like a certain identification with the body, and the body directs you, not the mind, the body directs you in action. And the way the body directs you in action is through the chakras. And you have to pay like really strong attention to what the chakras are saying and doing. So like through the heart chakra, or through so if you're in front of someone and your heart chakra vibrates in a positive way, then the message is you want to go towards them. And if the heart chakra is vibrating in a negative way, then the message is you want to move away from them. And it's the same with your solar plexus. The solar plexus is an action, about action. If it's vibrating in a negative way, then you're wanting to move away from that or question that. And it takes time. Like, I'm still learning, and it's like an endless process of learning and interpreting the chakras, like what they're saying. But it feels like this direct message from life itself. So rather than it going through this identity that's in the head and this image of you and your life and how you look in your life, it's like this vibration of the body is speaking, and you're moving through this vibration of the body, and you're navigating this world through vibration more than you are the intellect. But the intellect is a vibration as well. So also that has to, you have to pay attention to that. So to me, the way that you find what good and bad is through the body. It's not so much an intellectual thing, it's through feeling it in the body. And it's still something I'm learning, and I'm evolving, like how to live this as a human being, that realization, that shift, and how to live that as well as being human and interacting with life. So blaming is coming from it can come from all areas, but it's coming most likely from the solar plexus, the heart, or the throat. So one of those. So more than likely it's strongly the heart. So the heart contains guilt, like I'm guilty, I've done something wrong. And when you're saying they're guilty, you're actually saying yourself, because blame is like the external guilt. So whoever you're seeing out there and you're blaming, it's actually an aspect of yourself. So it's like the external guilt. It's the same as guilt. But guilt is inwards and blame is outwards. And some people feel more comfortable blaming. So they feel comfortable blaming others for the state of their life or for what's happened in their life. And then some people feel more comfortable blaming themselves for the way their life is or what's happening in their life. And it's kind of the same momentum, because who are you blaming? Like, who are these people but fictions of your imagination? That they're not actual people. Your mind is formulating the story of them. And then your mind is blaming them. There isn't actually a them there. It appears that they've done things. So I'm not saying excuse people's actions when they've acted inappropriately, but everything that you see about them is your interpretation. And so if you interpret that somebody's treated you inappropriately, and if you think that's a fair interpretation, then it's best to stay away from them. That's not what I'm saying, is like go and like everything's your imagination, so you can go and be friends with like Jack the Ripper. Like I'm not implying that. It's just seeing that blame is the external guilt. And sometimes it's easier to blame because guilt is like one of the worst feelings, like guilt and shame, because it's about you, who you think you are, that you've done something wrong. Hi Edith, hi, nice to just be in silence with you. What exactly is forgiven? Yeah. Exactly, because to forgive someone, you're assuming that they're guilty. I think it's beautiful to reflect on this concept of forgiveness, and it depends what level you are. Like if I was speaking to somebody that's never been into this subject, forgiveness might be a really important concept to break down lots of other concepts. So this idea of forgiveness, that it might not be the other person's fault, the idea of empathy, looking at why the other person did that, like what was their motivation. But then eventually you get to the point where you see that there is nobody to forgive because there's nobody that acted. Like, who is there that acted? Hi Isabel. I experience the opposite of forgiveness right now. It just seems impossible for me to experience right now, to genuinely talk or think myself into forgiveness. I understand it's just hurting myself mostly, and the perpetrator could not help but act that way, and it's not the individual doer, and I'm also guilty of wrongdoing in many ways. I just don't get free from the intensity contracted identification. Yeah. Yeah. Who would you be if you didn't have a perpetrator? Like, what would your mind think about? And it's also like a way of dealing with anxiety. Like, it's not just about doership, it's the way of the mind processing anxiety. So you have blame, and it comes from like the heart chakra. Or guilt comes from the heart chakra. And it's actually a way of you dealing with an anxiety that you're afraid of your survival, or you're afraid of being abandoned, and you're afraid of being vulnerable. You're afraid of your future. It's like a way of your mind, like almost repeating the anxiety, but finding a story for that anxiety and then increasing it. Like, it's not true, the blame stories that you're going through. Even though there might be some relative truth that the people are acting inappropriately, like the blame and the hatred and the energy that's going over it isn't true. So just come back to where it hurts. So like the heart or the throat or the solar plexus, like they make you feel out of control or helpless or vulnerable. And see that you can get the same for bills or for money, for your home. Like this perpetrator, that life is always coming for you and getting you, and that you're victim to life. Like ultimately it's like a victim to God. And it's like a childlike and very weak position to play in. Like, I'm victim to this life. And nobody is victim. Hi Ronald. Hey Lisa, thank you for your wonderful and helpful work. Greetings from Austria. Hello Austria. Experiencing a kind of burning strong energy in the middle of the back and the spine, behind the heart. Think it's to do with Kundalini, not sure. Any thoughts? Not painful, just strong energy. Yeah, it's that chakra. You can have it on the front or the back, the heart chakra, more than likely. It's just staying with it and seeing that it's not true, the energy. And seeing what thoughts are there. Like, are you feeling guilty or ashamed or abandoned or lonely? The heart chakra tends to be, on the positive side, it's like wanting love, expressing love, feeling like it fits in, feeling like it is loved, feeling like it has something to offer to the group, that it can participate in the group, feeling connected, open, expanded, intimate. And then on the negative, it's feeling kicked out from the group, abandoned, rejected, vulnerable, unloved, guilty, like it did something wrong. The guilt is the same as like being kicked out from the group. Shame. And also blame you can feel there as well. And pride. Just seeing what energy is in there. Hi Annika. It appears that the internet is appreciating the silence more than the person do. I love the silence part of the talks. Thank you. Nice, Annika. Petra. Dear Lisa, as far as I understand, it's all just a game. What I experience as a person called Petra is nothing more than a dream. This is basically pure anarchy. No good, no bad. None of what happens really happened. Are there people who have recognized this and therefore cross every border in good as well as evil? Thank you, Lisa. I don't know about the crossing the boundary, but you've got this famous story by forgotten who the main character is called, Aruna or someone, about going to war. And he said, I can't go to war and kill my brothers and sisters. And God said, you're not going to war, I am going to war. And then there's also this story of Gulamala. Who lived in a forest and killed every person that walked through the forest. And then the Buddha went to walk through the forest and everyone was like, no, you can't walk through the Buddha, the Gulamala will kill you. And he walked through the forest and Gulamala saw the Buddha and he ran to catch up with the Buddha and he couldn't catch up with the Buddha. And then finally the Buddha, and then he was screaming to the Buddha, slow down, I can't catch up with you. And finally the Buddha turned around and said, I'm not moving, it's you that's running too fast. And then in that he woke up. I don't know, but life, the essence isn't good or bad. Isn't that radical? The essence doesn't care. It's not that it doesn't even care, it's just silent, watching everything playing out, and loves it all, it embraces it all. It doesn't reject any part, it doesn't have hierarchy. Hi Lisa, Joanna from Vancouver again. Lisa, I wonder whether my fear of having a relaxation awakening arising was because of deep fear of any kind of identification. I think this stems from the experience of suddenly awakening I had in my teens, late teens, that terrified me as I couldn't make sense of it and no one I asked knew what was happening. My sole ambition until recently has been to create an identity. I love just now hearing you say that someone identification is needed to live in this world. That makes me feel relaxed in my body. Thank you. Sending you love, dear Lisa. Oops, dear, forgot fear of loss of any kind of infant. Yeah. There has to be some form of identification with the body. I mean, some teachers say that's not the case, but to me, when I had these moments where there's absolute disidentification with the body, I couldn't function. And a lot of teachers do say that as well, like there needs to be some desires that come back to keep you grounded in the body. But that's not who you are as well. So on the other side, that identification that you've created isn't who you are. I think it's really healthy that you've gone through all of that and done that, but that's not the experiencer. That's not you. It's an experience appearing in you, and it comes and goes. And the identification is always holding on to something solid, but there is nothing solid here. There is this one energy that's endless and expanded.